Jiangshi. In Chinese folklore, the Jiangshi is what happens when a soul refuses to leave its body, or simply cannot. The name translates roughly to stiff corpse, and that's exactly what you get. A reanimated body, locked in full rigor mortis, arms frozen straight out in front of it, forced to move by hopping because its joints are too rigid to bend. It feeds by draining the qi, the life force, from the living, leaving victims hollow and dying. According to tradition, a Jiangshi can be created by a corpse that was struck by moonlight before proper burial, by someone who died by suicide, or simply by an improper funeral rite. The most reliable way to stop one is to slap a yellow paper talisman, called a fu, directly onto its forehead. Running water will halt it too, since it cannot cross a flowing stream. Without the talisman, you are simply hopping away from something that does not get tired. Gashadokuro. The Gashadokuro does not sneak up on you in the traditional sense. Something 15 times the height of a human cannot really sneak. According to Japanese folklore, this colossal skeleton forms from the accumulated rage of soldiers who starve to death on forgotten battlefields, their bones fusing together into a creature that stands roughly as tall as a small office building. It roams only between midnight and dawn, and the only warning you get is a sudden ringing in both ears. Then it reaches down, takes your head clean off, and drinks the blood that sprays from the stump. It cannot be killed or destroyed in any conventional sense. You can only hope the sun rises before it finds you. One origin legend connects it to the spirit of Takeyashi Haim, a sorceress said to have summoned it as a weapon of revenge against the emperor's forces. Aswang. The Aswang holds the title of the most feared creature in Philippine mythology, and it earns that title specifically because of what it targets. By day, it looks exactly like a normal person. Your neighbor, a midwife, a friendly stranger. The only way to identify one in human form is by its eyes, which reflect light in reverse, dark where they should glow bright. At night, it hunts pregnant women, hovering outside the window and extending a long, hollow tongue through the mother's navel to feed on the unborn child, while she sleeps completely unaware. In some regional variants across the Visayas, the Aswang is sophisticated enough to replace the body with a banana trunk carved into the shape of the victim, which slowly rots in the bed, mimicking natural illness over days while the real person is already dead. One variant is named the Teke-Teke for the sound it makes while hunting, and the sound gets quieter the closer it gets. Pontianak. The Pontianak is a spirit born from a woman who died during childbirth or while pregnant, and she carries that trauma into every encounter. She appears on jungle roads and in quiet neighborhoods as a beautiful woman in white, drawing men toward her. The first warning is scent, a floral fragrance, sweet and sudden, which flips within seconds to the smell of rotting flesh. By then, she is already too close. She kills by disemboweling her victims with her bare fingernails, which she keeps long and sharp for exactly this purpose. There is one documented way to neutralize her. Drive a nail into the hole at the back of her neck, and according to Malay tradition, she becomes a calm, living woman. Remove the nail, and she returns to what she is. The city of Pontianak in Indonesia is said to be named after an encounter with this creature during its founding, though historians note the exact origin of the name is still debated. Kuchisake-onna. In 1979, schools across multiple prefectures in Japan began dismissing students early. Police patrol schedules were increased. The reason was a ghost story that had somehow crossed the line into a public safety concern. Kuchisake-onna, the slit-mouthed woman, approaches wearing a surgical mask, which was common enough in Japan to be unremarkable, and asks a single question: "Am I beautiful?" Say no, and she kills you. Say yes, and she pulls the mask down to reveal her mouth, slashed from ear to ear, and asks again. Either answer at that point leads to violence. She cuts your face to match hers, or follows you home. According to the folklore, the only escape is to say she looks average, which confuses her long enough to run, or to mention you have somewhere to be, because apparently she is too polite to detain someone with an appointment. The legend is believed to originate from a woman mutilated by a jealous husband, though the exact historical root is debated among folklorists. Layak. The Layak is a human being by day, typically a sorcerer or someone who has traded their soul to Rangda, the demon queen of Balinese Hindu mythology. The trade is straightforward: power in exchange for your body's integrity every night. When the sun goes down, the Layak's head separates from its shoulders and lifts into the air with all the organs still attached: heart, lungs, and intestines trailing beneath it like a grotesque kite tail. It can shapeshift mid-flight into a pig, a monkey, a fireball, or an enormous floating head to confuse anyone pursuing it. It hunts pregnant women and newborns, drawn specifically to the smell of blood and placenta. The head must reconnect to the body before sunrise, and if it cannot, the person dies permanently. The Layak is not a creature from ancient history in Bali. It is actively believed in today, and the Barong Rangda ritual ceremony, still performed in Balinese villages, directly addresses the danger it represents. Mananangal. The name Mananangal means one who severs itself, and the name is precise. This creature from Visayan Philippine folklore does not just transform. It splits in half at the waist, leaving the lower portion of its body standing motionless wherever it left it, like abandoned luggage, while the upper torso sprouts enormous bat wings and flies off to hunt. It targets sleeping pregnant women the same way the Aswang does, using a long, thin tongue inserted through the navel. The key difference from most creatures on this list is that the Mananangal has a specific, reliable kill method. Find the lower half while it is standing alone, and rub salt, garlic, or ash onto the exposed torso stump. When it tries to reattach before sunrise and cannot, it dies. In some rural communities in the Philippines, salt and garlic are still placed on windowsills, as a matter of course. Not a superstition exactly, just as a reasonable precaution. Yuki-onna. The snow woman kills beautifully, which is almost worse than killing brutally. She appears during blizzards as a pale, translucent figure in a white kimono, and she is the last thing many travelers see before they freeze. She kills by breathing a mist directly into her victim's face, crystallizing them from the inside, or in some regional variants, simply by staring until cold radiates out and stops the body. Lafcadio Hearn documented her in his 1904 collection Kwaidan, recording a variant from Musashi province in which she spares a young man on the condition he never speaks of the encounter, then later appears in his village as a normal woman, marries him, has children with him, and lives quietly for years until he accidentally breaks his promise. She leaves no footprints in the snow, and in several accounts she shows genuine mercy toward children, killing the adults in a group while leaving the youngest ones cold but alive. Nukekubi. The Nukekubi looks completely human during daylight hours, and that is the most unsettling part of the whole arrangement. The only visible sign is a faint ring of red characters printed around the base of the neck, which most people would have no reason to examine closely. According to Edo period Japanese texts, once night falls, the head detaches entirely and flies through the darkness, screaming and biting, while the body lies inert wherever it was left. A bite causes serious illness or death. The creature is not invincible, though. If someone finds the headless body and moves or hides it before the head returns, the Nukekubi is finished. The head will search frantically through the dark, shrieking, growing increasingly desperate until sunrise, at which point it dies. The Nukekubi is distinct from the Rokurakubi, whose neck simply stretches to unnatural lengths, but remains attached. That distinction matters a great deal if you are the one doing the identifying. Penanggalan. The Penanggalan is the Malaysian folklore tradition's answer to a question no one asked, which is what if a severed head kept its organs? A woman who made a pact for supernatural power pays the price nightly. Her head detaches, trailing stomach and intestines beneath it as it flies, soaking wet and glistening. To reattach in the morning, she must soak the organs in a large vat of vinegar kept hidden inside her home, which shrinks them back to a size that fits through the neck. The smell of vinegar around a house is, in some traditional communities, considered a warning sign. She hunts women in labor, drawn to the smell of blood, which is why thorny branches were historically hung around the doors and windows of homes with newborns specifically, to snag and tear her trailing intestines before she could get inside. A wasting illness in some accounts, called Penanggalan sickness, is said to follow anyone she touches. Jorugumo, a spider that lives for 400 years, according to Japanese folklore, gains something dangerous: the ability to look like a woman. The Jorugumo uses this ability the way a trap uses bait. She appears as a beautiful woman, draws a man into her home, and plays music, specifically to mask the sound of silk threads being spun around him. By the time the music stops, he cannot move. She dissolves victims with venom and feeds on them without urgency. Joran Falls in the Izu Peninsula of Shizuoka Prefecture is the location most consistently associated with her in Japanese regional accounts, where she is said to wrap a thread around the leg of woodcutters and drag them into the water below the falls. In some domestic versions of the story, she takes a husband, has children, and only reveals herself when her husband accidentally discovers her true form, at which point the marriage ends in the most final way possible: Toyl. The Toyl is purchased, which makes it distinctly different from every other creature on this list. In Malay and Singaporean folklore, a bomo, a traditional shaman, performs a ritual over the corpse of a miscarried or aborted fetus, animating it as a small supernatural servant. The buyer acquires the Toyl specifically to steal money from neighbors or inflict misfortune on enemies. The cost of ownership is ongoing. The Toyl must be fed with blood from the owner's finger or toe on a regular basis, and must be treated with the care you would give a living infant, provided with toys, milk, and attention. Neglect it, and it turns. The Toyl becomes destructive toward its owner, causing illness, psychological deterioration, or death. It is described as resembling a small gray or green infant with red eyes and sharp teeth. To stop a neighbor's Toyl mid-mission, the traditional countermeasure is to leave out sweets and small toys. It will stop to play and forget what it was sent to do. Teke-Teke. The Teke-Teke is the upper half of a young woman's body, her legs lost to a train, and she moves faster than you can run. The name comes from the sound she makes dragging herself across the ground on her elbows, or in some versions on a scythe, a rapid rhythmic scraping described as tek-tek-tek that gets louder as she closes the distance. According to the urban legend, which spread through Japan with one of its most cited origin points in Hokkaido, she bisects victims at the waist with her scythe, creating new Teke-Teke from her kills. A riddle involving a red cloak is said to stop her in some regional variants, though the correct answer changes depending on who is telling the story, which is not particularly useful information in an emergency. What is consistent across accounts is the speed. She is always described as moving faster than a running adult, which means the scraping sound you hear behind you is already a problem. Yamata no Orochi. The Yamata no Orochi is recorded in Japan's oldest written chronicle, the Kojiki, compiled in 712 AD, which means this creature has been formally documented for over 1,300 years. It has 8 heads and 8 tails, and its body stretches across 8 valleys and 8 hills simultaneously, with moss and trees growing on its back as if it were a landscape rather than a living thing. Its eyes are described in the Kojiki as red as the winter cherry fruit. It came to a family called Ashinazuchi and Tenazuchi every year, and took one of their daughters, consuming 7 of them before the storm. God Susanoo intervened. His method was straightforward: 8 vats of sake, 1 for each head. When all 8 heads were drunk and sleeping, he cut them off. The blood ran into the river and turned it red. Inside one of the tails, he found a sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, which remains one of the 3 imperial treasures of Japan and is housed today at Atsuta Shrine in Nagoya, where it has never been publicly displayed. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.